take that theme forward in terms of the virus resurgence that we are seeing in India. Have you worked out numbers on how this would impact India's economic outlook for FY 2022? Because same time last year was a big contraction quarter for India.
It would not be that bad, Tanvir, because the lockdowns are regional. The wherewithal to deal with the pandemic and keep factories running, even if there's a lockdown, is significantly greater this time than it was last year. So we will not, start downgrading our forecast substantially. I think the view is that it's certainly going to take a bite out of economic activity and GDP in this quarter, because especially a state like Maharashtra, which is such a large chunk of India's GDP, goes into some degree of mobility restriction. But that doesn't mean, again, that we will see the catastrophic contraction-like situation again in the April-June quarter. So right now, India is still on track to have a very strong base effect-driven recovery. But the Jan-March to April-June sequential momentum is significantly going to be curtailed by what's happening in the outbreak. And also, let's be very humble and say that, we really don't know how far this pandemic has to go. We saw instances in the US late last year when at its absolute peak, there were 250,000 daily cases. Once vaccination really began to take a hold, you had that dip very, very dramatically and went all the way down to where we are now, 50, 60,000 a day. Now, consider India's case, where we now are sort of the more than 200,000 a day situation. Vaccination is spreading, and in that tug of war between vaccination and mutant virus infecting people, at some point the vaccination part will win. Is it in the next 2 weeks, or is it in the next 5 weeks? Let's hope that it's earlier than later.
Yeah, and let's hope it's in weeks, not months, perhaps years, but that's something that we can only monitor closely as we go along. Taimur, the IMF raised India's growth forecast for FY 2022 to 12.5%. I know maybe you've not, reworked your numbers, but how significant a scale back would this quarter's performance have on the overall annual numbers?
Well, from the IMF's baseline, at least a 200 basis points downside, so more like 10 than 12, but we were at about 10.5 in terms of our FY 21-22 forecast, which may now have a 50 to 75 basis points downside. So I think 10-ish is still on the cards. Depends on the duration of this lockdown-driven contraction in economic activity.